Welcome to Deadset Anime. Hello folks, Deadset here, and today we are going to be looking at modeling. Now, as far as modeling goes, I have my own way of doing things. I do not like the standard fare out-of-the-box model. I like to model along the muscle groups and then allow my edge groups to flow around that. So today we're going to be taking a look at models and discuss what I think will be improvements to 3D models. And mind you that there's no correct way of doing this. Well, there is a correct way of doing it. If you're rigging and you're going for deformations, yes, you must adhere to some type of modeling standard. However, in the long run, there are many ways of doing this. So we're not going to get caught up on who's right or who's wrong. Now, what we are looking at is your standard female topological model. And we see, the standard intersections, basically straight vertical, straight horizontal. What I don't like is I don't like what's going on around the hips, especially around the glutes. I think that the breast needs some work. And I don't like what's going on around the joints, and frankly I just don't like that loop going on around the torso area, because to me I generally like to isolate my extremities. So if I were to follow loops around this character, you would follow a loop from like the arms to the legs, and that just doesn't work for me. I like to isolate my loops, and I'm going to show isolation later. Now, this is not a very clean model. I can tell from looking at the topology that the artist here was going for. He was going for detail and deformation. The problem is that this will be a nightmare to try to bring out the UVs so that you can apply texture. I don't think one needs to add this many polys and go outside of the loop structure to get this level of detail. So, but there are some clever things going on. I like what's going on around the tricep as it comes down into the forearm with that ligament. But what I don't like is what's going on in the deltoid. That is sort of a nightmare. And if we look at the right arm, it's just a mangled mess. And if we look at the back, there are other clever things going on that I can actually really get with. Some of the muscle groups are isolated, and that's a good thing. However, some of it doesn't make sense, and that's a bad thing. I'm not sure what's going on with the spine, but I think there's too much going on here. So this one would not get my seal of approval. Here we have a more detailed model that looks like some type of wonky Lara Croft model. Maybe this was one of those feminist, corrections that was made on the 3D model. Needless to say, it looks awful. The topology is standard fare. The problem that I have with this model, for the lack of detailing going on with the skin surfaces, there are just too many polygons. It's very inefficient. And while I understand that this is not a finished model, I'm biased because I'm repulsed by the idea of it. The whole thing makes no sense to me. Now, this is a model that looks like it was rigged, and this dancer model is, again, standard fare. I think there was clever use of the polygons to create new surfaces, such as the shorts and the shirt with skin bearskin belly. However, I'm not sure what's going on around the knees. I understand that much of that was done for deformation, but I don't think it's necessary. There would be some stretching going on around where the shorts meet the thigh. But again, this is a game model, so these are the sort of things that you would expect in game models. One thing I'm not sure of is what's going on around the face. I mean, that's almost horrendous. And finally, we come to what I consider to be a very clever model. I like what's going on here. It is a good balance of polygon efficiency, detail, and form. I like this. There are some things that do give me pause, but this model is purposely done. So bravo. This is something that I approve of, but however, I don't approve of some of the polygon loops around the torso. And that's generally because I have a completely different way of doing torsos. However, what is very clever is the way the muscles stretch from the armpit to the collarbone near the deltoid. That is very clever. Now let's take a look at some of my own models. The model that I'll be using, you've seen in my videos earlier. It's a model that I've been working on for several years now. It is completely rigged, and it is already used in my own production. And that is the character Deadset. So let's take a look at the wireframe. One of the things that I pride myself on is isolation. So let me show you what isolation means. In my edge loops, I try to isolate all the muscle groups as I stated earlier. Now all groups will flow from the torso. So if you take a look at my edge flow, you will see the intersections do not move up and down as with your run-of-the-mill models. They actually run diagonally and along the flow of, as you can see, some of the major muscle groups like the latissimus dorsi, or here in the abdominis. And the reason why I do this is to make sure that things are isolated. The forearm is isolated from the bicep and upper arm. And also as you go down, the lower legs are isolated from the upper leg or the thighs. And I have enough polygons here for it to be both efficient and full of form. This was not edited in ZBrush. This is actually me just pushing polygons around. But let's go ahead and look at some of the isolation. Let's take the forearm, for instance. The forearms, if you look at the loops, they will never go down to the thigh, ever, or any of the legs. Same with the arms. Nowhere does elements of the arm reach the legs. And we can go ahead and put loops. We can go ahead and run loops everywhere around this model. They will never reach the legs. And the same goes for the limitations from the upper arm to the lower arm. They are isolated. Of course, the upper arm is affected by the neck and chest, so naturally they will extend to those areas. And you will also find them extending to the deltoids at some point. Not the deltoids, excuse me, but the trapezoids. But what you won't see are any loops that extend down to the lower extremities. And the same go for the legs. I can choose any loop here. They will never reach the arm. They'll go up the back. They will go up the chest. They will go around the torso, but they will never reach the arms. And for me, this type of isolation is important. And it's done early on in my modeling. This may look like a small thing. However, when it comes to deforming models, it's very important, because once you bend the leg, there's enough mass there at the knee, because one part of the knee is not going to move here at the patella. There's enough mass there at the knee to have a successful deformation when the leg is at 90 degrees. And the same go for the arms. Isolation serves not just the purpose of form, but it also serves the purpose of deformation. I'm not going to focus on the head so much because generally speaking, that bit of modeling is pretty solid. Most people know how to do heads, and they know how to make the edge loops around the eyes and around the mouth. So I'm just going to focus on the torso. Now I'm just going to speed it up, and you can just take a look and see how I get the shapes that I get and where I create my loops. And this is the outcome of the character. So we take a look at this character. You can see that, again, polygon isolation has taken place. So the arms, even with this smaller amount of polygons, again, they never reach the loops and never reach the legs. And we can go ahead and test all of this, and just to see that I have ensured that the loops always remain isolated for the extremities. Any deformations that take place will be done with ease because there will be very little cleanup, given the fact that I've used polygons to ensure that the deformations are accurate. In summary, there are lots of ways to create a character model. My goal here was to try to get artists to think outside of the box a little bit more when they're creating these models. There's no need for your intersections to always be perpendicular and horizontal. In fact, in my opinion, I think that's a mistake. And the way that I create my models may be a bit more advanced. I think that you will get better outcomes and that the models make much more sense, even though they may be a bit more challenging to UV map. So that's the video of today. And remember, keep practicing and think outside of the box, work outside of the box, take chances, try things, because you just may come up with something that is very clever.